Project plan. An important element of our monitoring plan is also to include elements related to the project management plan. That means that we need to include a plan to manage our schedule, our budget, which is an important element for the donor, a plan to manage our risk and assumptions that we have, a plan to manage the team to make sure that they have the resources and they have the skills needed to do their activities, a plan to manage the relationship with our key stakeholders, and a plan to manage communications and make sure that the right information gets to the right people at the right time. The schedule is an important element of the project. That's not only where we list all our project activities with estimated durations, but it's also an opportunity to help us monitor changes between what we planned and what was actually done. Something that we use to that is to mark the progress with a percentage complete column in the progress that we make in our schedule. Another element that is important in our schedule plan is to make sure that each activity has a person responsible for it. So we can use a simple or complex Gantt chart to manage our project schedule, where we list all the project activities. We include a column where we have a percent completion for each activity. Activities that are completed between the time that they are designed help us monitor how we're planning and how we are actually delivering the project. We can also use the Gantt chart capabilities where we identify the activities with bars that can help us also identify where we are in terms of the project progress if we want to compare it with a line which will be today's date, and we want to see where we're having problems with certain activities that are lagging behind. That is an opportunity for the project manager to look at the schedule, to see what is happening, and to make the corrective actions as needed. The project budget also needs a plan. It's the list of all the monitoring tasks and determine their cost. This is important because many times the design of the project becomes the project plan, and we forget many times to identify the cost of monitoring, the cost of collecting indicators. So they need to be included and make sure that we have the right resources, that we got the right budget for all of our staffing. We review also in that project plan and make sure that we are meeting the donor's requirements on which elements are being allowed into the project donors and which elements may not be allowed. And we use it to monitor deviations from changes. And we can use like a simple S-curve that plots the information and schedule with time and with cost, and practically tells us how we are accumulating those planned expenses on the project over time. Another way to do it is using another spreadsheet where we list all our activities and the periods for our project. In this case could be months, and we identify all the costs that are going to be happening in each month, and we have our totals. So all our totals are going to be telling us how much we plan to spend each month, and then we use to compare it with how much we are actually spending on the project. The idea is that we are able to track how we are following the plan, and if there are any deviations, we can take corrective action before it is too late. Risk assumption is also an important element in our project plan, where we are defining the responses and the strategies, responsibilities for any risks that were identified in the project. We also monitor changes in the risk, or if there are any new risks in the project, and we also use it to change assumptions. As I mentioned before, assumptions tend to change over time. We can use a simple matrix where we identify all our risk by the type, a description of the risk, and we use the elements of the impact and probability indexes on each one of these risks. A high-level impact and a high-level probability will give us an index 9, which is the multiplication of those two elements. A low probability, a low impact and a low probability will also give us a low index. The idea is that with the index, then we can identify those risks that need immediate actions, and we need to start getting some specific responses and strategies. A low index will mean that we don't need to take care or spend a lot of time behind that. We just monitor if there are going to be any changes. And there could be some in between that we might have some specific plans that we might consider using it depending on the resources available to the project. Team is another element that we need to have a good plan. At the beginning, we identify all the tasks and the type of skills that are needed in order to accomplish those activities. We assess the skills of the project team, including partner organizations. Do they have the skills, knowledge, and experience to do the job? And then we use the plan to assign specific roles and responsibilities for everybody in the team. In many cases, depending on the size of the project, we might identify an M&E officer, monitoring and evaluation officer, who can be in charge of all the monitoring plan and activities of collecting indicators. And the plan also helps us identify and create a plan to develop and fill the skill gaps that we find in the team. Here's an example of a simple matrix that we can use where we list all the activities in the project. Here are the description of all the activities, and then we list in another column the team members or other members who are responsible for those activities. And what we do is a basic array chart where we identify the person who is responsible, only one person per activity. The person who authorizes or is accountable for activity, again there's only one person, should not be the same as the person who is responsible. And as needed, the people who are going to be consulted, or they need to be informed about the progress of that activity. That way we can identify the key responsibilities in the project, who are the people who are accountable or authorized, and make a quality control on that activity is completed or not. Stakeholder is also an element that we need to have a plan that is to monitor the levels of support and interest, as they also tend to change over time. It provides opportunities to participate in the project and build additional interest and commitment to the project, but also helps us to communicate and build relationships with them. We can use a simple matrix that can help us identify the stakeholders based on their level of interest and their level of influence. A high level of influence and a high level of interest will be a group A. Here will be your donor. You can have a high level of influence group, but with low interest. It's somebody that you need to work because they have the influence, they have the power in the project, and because they have low interest, that is how we can help them move through a higher level of interest so they can provide us with their support or specific resources that we need. A group that is at this level with low influence and low interest, you don't need to make many actions, you just follow their interest. And you can also have a group that has high interest but low influence. Also, it's another group that needs communications, so you can support their interest through the life of the project. Here's another matrix that you can use based on the interest area. Different stakeholders might have different interests on different areas of the project. Depending on who is your stakeholder, they might have a specific interest on specific outcomes of the project. There may be a case like the donor who is interested in every element of the project, or a group of beneficiaries who are all interested in these components. By mapping this information with your stakeholders also help you understand when you need to communicate with them, how you want to communicate with them, and what type of message you want to send. You don't need to send information about outcomes they're not interested, because you're going to be wasting their time, but it's important that they get the information they needed in the areas that they have an interest. Communications is another important plan in the project, because it helps us communicate not only the needs of the stakeholders. Every stakeholder has a different communication needs. Also identify the frequency of the communications and how we're going to be communicating that information. We can use a very simple matrix where we have the different type of communications on the project, why we're using it, the type of method we select, a format, a frequency, the recipient, and the person responsible for that. What is important is that you are able to then identify all the key components of your communication plan and make sure that everybody understands and there are people responsible behind that.